I think last session we were discussing about ER diagrams, and I think I gave a high-level overview and then said we'll cover it in the next session, right? So let's pick it up from there. So to crisply summarize what we learned in the last session, we learned about the steps involved in creation of a database, right? We'll start off with the requirement analysis, then we'll create the high-level design, which is done by an ER model. Then a logical model would be created based on the technology that you're using, like SQL Server or Oracle or whatever it is. Then you would optimize it. You would actually allocate space onto the physical hard disk. Then give access controls. Right now, one key thing that you should understand is you are not going to create the ER model. Okay, all these steps from here to here is generally done by a DBA or a data modeler, whatever it is, right? You are involved only in the step one. Okay. Now, having said that, you should be able to at least understand or interpret an ER model. You should be able to look at an ER model and then say, okay, this is the data that we are storing, and these are the business rules which are governing that ER model, right? So that is the scope of a BA, business analyst. Okay, so you're capturing the requirements which are required for the ER model, and then you should also understand by looking at that this is a ER model. You are not creating an ER model. Okay, I think that was one of the confusions what you guys had in the last session of how to create an ER model and all. You are not going to do that. Okay, so that I'm making it clear upfront. But maybe for doing some of your interface requirements and all those activities, you might need to understand ER models. Okay, so that is where understanding of ER models is required by you as a BA, right? So last session I gave you an example about a hospital management system, and then we broadly looked at the ER model. Right? Now, the key components of an ER model, there are three main things. There are entities, which is defined as a person, place, event, or a thing. Right? So, anything about which you need to store, which is a person, place, event, or a thing, which needs to go into the system, you'd consider that as an entity. Okay, that's a thumb rule which you can use. Right? So, figure out what are all the people about which you need to store information, what about the things that you need to store. Then each one of them becomes an entity, right? Like in this case, there is a doctor and a patient who are people. Then there is an appointment, which is an event. There is a bill, which is a thing. Insurance company, you can consider that as a person or a place. Either way, we are good with it, right? So you have figured out all those entities. Then the next component of an ER diagram is the attributes. For each of those entities, you'll figure out, what information do we need to store about these entities, right? So these becomes the attributes, right? Like for a doctor, I would store his name, address, his zip code, his phone number, his primary specialty, and also an ID number, right? For an appointment, I'll check the time, date, and then the duration of the appointment, the reason, and then the status of the appointment. Okay. For a patient, I would store his name, address, birth date, home phone, and all those details for a patient. Right? Maybe we can add a few more, like his diagnosis or his previous visits, his history, and all that. So which anyway is not there in this database, but usually I would think we could add that as well, right? Then for a bill, maybe you need to store about the amount which is insured for the bill, amount which is not insured, and then generate it as separate bills, or different payments should be made for each one of them. Right? There would be a status of the bill and the date on which the bill is generated and all that. So what you're doing is for each of those entities, you're figuring out what information are we capturing and what we need to store. Okay, so those becomes your attributes. And the third key component is the relationships. Okay, now let's consider we don't have any of these relationships, right? So nothing is maintained. You're just figuring out all this information, and then they're not linked to each other. Okay, so none of these relationships is maintained. Now I'm storing all the information, whatever is coming. I'm storing information about doctor, the patient, appointments, the bills, payments, insurance companies, but nothing is related. So if I want to figure out, did we get the payment for this particular appointment, you will not know, right? So you have all the appointment information, you have all the payment information, but there is no link directly, right? So unless you have this information connected, it doesn't make sense later, right? The main reason why we are storing the information is so that we can retrieve it later. We can understand it and make sense of the data, right? That can happen only if you are maintaining these relationships. For example, in this case, I have this relation between an appointment and a bill, which means every appointment is generating a bill. So let's say this appointment was worth some, you have to generate $100 bill, right? $100 bill is generated. Now this $100 bill is paid by the customer or by the insurance company, by the patient or the insurance company, right? So overall, there are links here, right? So the appointments is linked to bill, so you can figure out, okay, this appointment has a bill of $100. This $100 is paid by this person. So you can effectively retrieve whether this payment has been made or not by utilizing these links, right? So that is the beauty of the ER model. It captures all the information and maintains that links between the various data points. It maintains the relationships between these various data points, so that information retrieval becomes easier. Okay. So broadly, do you understand what these links would do? Relationships. Why we need to capture the relationships? Okay. So did I explain about the cardinality and modality in the last session, or you want me to explain that again? Now the reason why we would capture these relationships is to bring in all those business rules. Okay. Now every business would have some rules governing those data, right? Now a simple example, like let's take this relation between a patient and appointment. Okay. Can there be more than one patient in an appointment? Obviously, no hospital wants to have like two patients in one appointment, right? So, there's always only one patient in an appointment, right? But can one patient have multiple appointments? Yes, I mean it's quite obvious. Like a patient can visit multiple times, and every time he needs to take an appointment. So, what it means is a patient can have multiple appointments, but an appointment can have only one patient. Right? So we are figuring out how are they related to one another. So this is called as cardinality. Right? Similarly, if you do that for a doctor in appointment. Can a doctor have multiple appointments? Definitely yes. There won't be any doctor who just have looked at one patient and then stopped his career. Right? So there are multiple appointments. Can one appointment have multiple doctors?
No.
So we don't know. I mean, the business has to tell us. Some hospitals allow, some hospitals won't allow. Right? So this was very much clear. I mean, no hospital would have allowed two patients to come into the same appointment. So some of them are very obvious. But some hospitals would say, if the patient is very critical, maybe two different specialists have to come in and then check him at the same time. Right? So they can create an appointment. Right? Or some hospitals would say, one doctor would visit and after that another doctor would come. Right? So that's a norm. Right? So if the hospital says multiple doctors can come in, then it will be a multiple to multiple. Right? Which means one appointment can have multiple doctors, one doctor can have multiple appointments. Right? If the hospital, the business user says, no, only one doctor can be in one appointment, it would be one to many. Okay. So broadly, what we are saying is, how is one instance of an entity related to instances of other entities? Right? How is one doctor related to appointments? Can he have more than one appointment or only one appointment? Okay, so this is called as cardinality. The next concept is modality. Okay, so modality tries to bring out the dependencies between two entities. Let me make it here so that, yeah. So it brings out cardinality is, you understand, it's one to many or many to one. Right? It could be one to one, it could be many to many, it could be many to one, or one to many. Right? So cardinality could be one of these four. Okay. Then modality basically would mean you're trying to find out the dependencies, right? So which entity is dependent on what? Okay. So that is covered as part of your modality. Now, to put it in simple way, you're figuring out which data should be there before you create another one, right? Now let's say I'm creating an appointment, right? Now before creating an appointment, do I need a doctor for creating an appointment? Should there be a doctor? Should I check whether he is available or not before creating a doctor? Obviously yes. Without a doctor you cannot even go and create an appointment, right? Doctor has to be available. So in this relationship between a doctor and appointment, doctor is mandatory. He is definitely required, right? So he is mandatory for creating an appointment. Let's say for a new doctor has come in, you're creating a doctor, you're registering a new doctor into your hospital, right? In that situation, does he need to have any appointments? So obviously not. Appointments would come in later. Right? A doctor is not dependent on the appointments, right? You'll first register the doctor once he's onboarded and all the formalities are completed, then the appointments would start coming. Okay, so a doctor can stay independently, an appointment cannot, right? So that is the information coming out using modality, right? So in this relationship between a doctor and appointment, a doctor is mandatory, appointment is optional. Okay, which means, so that's basically is what is brought out using your modality. It basically says which of these are nullable, not nullable. Nullable means they are optional, not nullable means they are mandatory. That's the terminology which is used. We can ignore all that. So O means optional, star means mandatory, right? So how do we represent this? It's very simple to represent. Okay, if you look at this diagram, all these symbols here basically brings out the cardinality and modality, right? Simple rule, right? For the cardinality, if there is one line here connecting the straight line, it means this is one, and if there are three lines, it means many. Right? So the cardinality here is 1 to n. Right? Very simple to remember. If there are three lines, it's multiple. If it's one line, it's one. Right? So blindly I can say this is a 1 to m, 1 to many type of relationship, which means one doctor can have multiple appointments. One appointment would have only one doctor. Okay? Cardinality is clear. Modality is still simpler. Wherever you find that it's optional, you put in a 0 or O for optional. Just have it as a thumb rule. Okay. So all this information about cardinality and modality I've just represented using these simple symbols. Very simple, right? So if it's cardinality that you want to represent, look out for one line, it means one. Look out for three lines, it means it's multiple. So it's a one to many relationship between these two. That's a cardinality. And modality, since appointment is nullable, you'll keep it as optional and an O here. And since doctor is mandatory, you'll not put an O here. Clear about this? The third component of an ER model?
Yes.
Okay. So if you are given an ER model, will you able to understand what it is trying to represent? Will you know, do you understand that these are the various entities, these are the various data points that we capture, and then the relationships are captured this way. So are you clear about all that? The business rules are defined using cardinality and modality. Right? All that information is coming out in one single diagram, with, and just looking at it, we can figure it out. Right? So the first objective of a business analyst, we try to cover, we try to understand an ER model, right? Now, if you are given an ER model, we can understand what all information it is trying to convey. Okay, so that objective is done. Right. Now, the second objective is how do we capture the requirements which are required for the database. Right. We'll we'll learn that using an example. So before going there, are you clear with this ER model? If I give you an ER model, will you able to understand what it is trying to convey? Right. So that I wanted to just check. Let's take this as a checkpoint. Any questions regarding a ER model? To interpret an ER model, do let me know. Do you understand what entities, what attributes are, and what relationships are? Cardinality and modality, the business rules. All that is clear?
So I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In what perspective we define that we need to draw an entity relationship diagram? And because there are in UML there are many diagrams, right? So when will
Now, ER diagram is not a UML diagram. So UML would be a different set of diagrams. I'll explain about that later. Right?
okay.
So this is basically
ER diagrams are drawn by an architect, right? We don't do the
yes.
ER diagrams. It's just for us to understand that.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay, fine.
So, like I said, I'm making it one more time clear. You are not going to draw an ER diagram. So you will not be asked to draw ER diagrams.
Okay.
Just that, if you are given a diagram, you should understand what it is conveying.
Okay, okay, fine. Because I missed the starting session. So, okay, thanks.
Okay. Right? I think that thing we should be clear to all. Right? So, any complex ER diagram, if I give you, you should be able to at least understand what it is trying to. So you should be able to understand, right? This is. So these are the various entities, and then these are the attributes under that, and then these are the relationships. Now, what we have looked at is a very simple example. So usually there would, there are systems wherein there would be hundreds of entities also, right? It's just that, depending on the complexity of the application, the number of entities could go to multiple ER diagrams, right? Yeah, again, this is a hospital accounting diagram again. So you have clients, you have cash register, then you have register, you have cashier, right? So there are multiple details that you are capturing. Okay. Now again, one thing I would suggest is not everything on the internet is right. Right. So don't take everything on the face of it and then think it's right. Because a lot of times I've seen people just upload it without validating whether it's right or wrong. Right. So use your discretion. So believe what you have learned, and if you find that something is wrong, there is a good chance that something could be wrong. Everything on the internet is not right. Okay, unless it's from a published source. Just check the source of the information that you are looking at as well. Okay, so in the data modeling, we have achieved our first objective, wherein we can look at a ER model and understand what it is trying to convey. These are the various entities. These are the details they are capturing, and then these are the relationships that are captured here, business rules. Okay, so we can figure that out. Let me show you how actually this translates into a database. Right now, all we are saying is that there is a group of information about the doctor that we are storing. There's a bunch of information about the patients that we are storing. A bunch of information about the partners. Right now. Whenever a doctor comes in, what will you do? You will capture all this information, right? And then add it into the database. Whenever another doctor comes in, you will add another record. So it's nothing but it's a table of information that you're storing, right? So if you look at it, each entity is nothing but a table, and all your attributes would be the columns. Whenever a new doctor comes in, you'll add a new record. Another doctor comes in, you'll add another record, right? The third doctor comes in, you'll add another record. So as and when a doctor is added, you're adding more records to it, right? So this is how your typical database would be, right? So when you're actively using the database, when the system is live and a new doctor is added, so it's nothing but it comes and sits into this table. You're adding that record into this table. So your ER model is nothing but a representation of tables, right? So each one of them is a table of information. There is a table for appointments. So appointment, what are you capturing? You're capturing date, time, reason, status, who is the doctor, and who is the patient. All this information goes into the appointment table. Okay, and then you capture all the patients. Whenever a patient comes in, you will add in the patient details into it. Okay, then you would also link them using the relationships, right? A doctor and appointment are linked by the ID number, right? So you'll add in a physician ID number to the appointment. So you'd mean that what it means is on 12th of June 2014 at 3 p.m. doctor with ID 1001, who is James, is visiting this patient, which is patient 002. Right? Let's call it as a bill. Some guy. Okay. So you can clearly link all these data points using these relationships. How are these relationships identified? Using the the primary and the foreign keys here. Right? So linking the ID number to the another table and then saying that this guy is visiting this appointment. Okay, this doctor is seeing this patient, and this appointment is created for that. Okay, now can you visualize how your ER model is translating into an actual database? Make sense now?
Yeah, on the basis of Excel, you mean to say how we put data into Excel and then relate it to the diagram.
Right. So, I mean, I've put it in Excel because I can show it to you here. But ideally, the database would be in a different way, right? So, you'd have something like a Oracle server or a Microsoft SQL server, which is capturing the data in a different way. But broadly, it will be organized in the same way. When you want to check out all the information about the doctor, you get all the doctors who are registered, the list of them here, right? Whenever a new doctor comes in, you will add a new record into this, right? So that is how each entity would be. So you'll capture all this information about each and every record or each and every instance of the doctor which comes. Okay. Okay. So that is done. Now let's first let's focus on the other objective, wherein how do we understand what data needs to go into the database? How do we play our role in figuring out what data needs to go, and how do we capture that during our requirements, right? So for that, let's pick up a small example, and then we'll go through the complete process, right? So it's a very simple example. Maybe it has some 3-4 screens as a whole as a system, right? I've taken this simple example because to understand the concept, we have to focus on some simpler examples, right? If I pick up a 100 table ER diagram, obviously we cannot do that in an hour or two. It might take us some 3-4 days, and it becomes difficult to understand the concept. So a very simple example. So there is a businessman, and he owns a lot of paintings. Okay. Now, what he does is he would loan the painting to a museum, and he would get some money out of that, right? So he would loan the painting for a month or maybe 2 months or so, and he'll get some payment for that, right? So he wants a system which will track all that paintings. Let's say he has some 1,000 paintings, and he has connections with multiple artists who would give him more paintings as well, right? So as and when a new painting comes in, he wants to capture all those details about the painting, and then he would loan it to multiple museums also. Okay. So he wants a system which can track all that. He can track how many paintings he owns, how many paintings he has loaned, when are they due, which artist has drawn it, right? And all those details about each and every painting, museum, and the loans and everything he wants to store, right? So that is a business requirement broadly. Okay. Now you are the business analyst. You've been onboarded. So you're first going through the illustration and then documentation session. So what do you do? Where do you start?
First, we need to understand what the businessman wants to do with it and how he wants to deal with the museum, and be a link between the museum and the businessman, and explain them
Right.
how the business works.
Okay. So yeah, good attempt. Now, what are all the functionality of this system? So list those 3-4 things that you want to do in the system. Right. So what do you want to do in the system first? Right. So let's list down the scope or the features that we want to do in the system. Go ahead. Somebody will start.
Yeah, so basically I think he wants to track where his paintings are and how much investment he has made.
Okay, let me ask this question. What is the first thing that he would do in the system? Let's say you visualize yourself using that system. What is the first thing that you would do?
Number of paintings distributed he owns.
So okay, now it's a brand new system that you've developed, right, and give it to the businessman. Okay. So what will he use that system? What is the first thing that he would do in the system?
Keep record of his paintings.
Right. So he would first enter his painting. Right. So enter the details of report painting. Right. So record or add a new painting. We'll keep it simple. We'll say add painting. Right. So he has 1,000 records. He will add all those 1,000 paintings into the system. Right. Now we need to create a screen for that, right? I mean, ideally there would be a screen which will have all the related details about the painting. Then what will you do? What else can you do? He would loan it to the museum, right?
Make the list of museums as well.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, he will, along the paintings, he will create a database where he could save which museums he's going to loan the paintings.
Yeah. So basically, loan the painting, right? So loan a painting. Okay. So I'll keep it broadly. These two are the features. Okay. So loan painting. Okay. So okay, now these are the two main things that he would do, right? So he would first add a painting whenever the painting is coming in, and then he would loan a painting. So whenever the painting he wants to loan it to a museum, he will loan it, right? So these are the two main things. Now, when we are going for our requirements, right? So let's pick up one screen at a time. So I'll use a whiteboard. Okay. So you have this first screen, wherein you are adding a new painting. Okay. Now, what all details you will capture when you are adding a painting, right? So this is a question that you will ask the SME or the businessman. What all details about the painting do you want to capture? Because no, we are not going to decide. We're just going to ask them, right? What all details do you want to store? So then I would say maybe he will give a name to the painting, right? He will capture the dimension.
Name, year, manufacturing.
Right. Right. All the details, whether it's a painting or is it a sketch or is it an oil painting, the type of painting. Right. Is it insured or not? Right.
Artist.
The name of the painter also who painted it.
Right.
Artist.
The name of the painter would come in. Right. Now, obviously, you want to capture more details about the painter as well. Right? Because the businessman would say, you know what, I want to store all the information about the painter also. Right. Now, ideally, how do you want to capture this information? You would not have all the painter, then painter name, painter preferences, then contact details and all that. You will not capture it at each of the painting. So maybe you want to add a additional screen. Maybe you'll have this drop down box. Once you click on it, it will open another screen, right, which will capture all the painting related information. Right, so you could search for a painter if it's already there captured in your system. If it's a new painter, you can add new painter. Right, so there is an add painter thing coming up. Add or select a painter. Okay. So now you want to capture some information about the painter or the artist, whatever it is. I'm using the word painter, but it's an artist. Okay. About the artist, you want to capture the information. So what all information you want to capture? Maybe you'll pop up a different screen and then capture that. Sometimes the the artist would have already been here in your database, so you'll just select it. Okay. So when you come to the screen, then you will ask him what all information about the artist you want to capture. Then you'll say you'll capture his name, his address, maybe his phone number, his preferences, right, and any other notes that you want to capture about it. Right. So some basic information, that is what I want to capture. Okay. I'll also give him an ID so that I can track him. I don't have to store all this information with every painting, so I'll just give him an ID. So I'll select that ID. Let's call it as artist 001. Right. So artist 001 is John Doe. I'm capturing his name. He lives in New York City, New York State, and his contact details are so and so. So you're capturing all the details about John Doe here. I'm giving him an ID A001, right? And then you're just linking it to that ID number here, and then when you're capturing the painting details, right? Now your screens would look like this, right? So when you do your prototyping, ideally you will do this part, isn't it? Similarly, when you loan a painting, what do you do?
Like we'll have a date of loan, how much period
Right.
you want to loan, and details of the loaner.
Right. Right. So basically, which museum you are loaning it to, right? So
Right.
that again, museum to which you are loaning it, you capture a lot of details about that, right? So you don't want to repeat that information again. So maybe it would lead to another screen wherein you would say add museum, add or select a museum. So you'd have the museum name, museum address, your coordinator there, who is the person of contact there, and if some payment needs to be made, what is the kind of payment he would make per day. Right? All those details, whatever is relevant for the businessman, you will ask those details and capture it here. Right? So you'll generally give a museum ID. Okay. So let's call this as M001. Right? Now all you will select here is M001. Right? So you don't have to repeat the the name, the address, then the coordinator there, the payment per day, and all that when you are loaning the painting. Every time you loan a painting, because there are some 1,000 paintings, and there could be hardly some 4 or 5 museums he is loaning it. So you don't want to repeat all this information for each and every painting that you are loaning. Okay. So you just capture the ID, and all that details are captured at a museum level. Okay. So broadly, you have figured out what data that you want to store as part of these various screens, right? So there's a painting which ID also you will give. Let's call it as painting 001. Okay. So looking at this, you've gone purely from a functional viewpoint, right? So you've figured out, okay, you know what? First I need to capture the painting. Then as part of that I also capture the artist details. Then I would loan a painting, and then as a part of that I would also capture some museum details. Okay. So you would have done this part and then documented all this into your BRD. Okay. Then the architect would pick it up from here and then create an ER model. Okay. Now how is he going to do it? First he is going to identify the entities, right? Where did my screen go? Yeah. Anyway, so we had these two screens and then another screen for painter, artist, and another one for museum. Right? Another screen would pop up and then you enter and then. Now you give these details to the architect. So the architect would go through his process of identifying entities, then the attributes, and then the relationships also. Okay, so he will figure out okay, what are all the entities in this? How do we define entities? A person, place, event, or a thing, right? So a painting is a person, a museum is a place, artist is a person, painting is a thing, right? Thing, this is a place, this is a person, this is an event, right? Reservation or loan as we call it as, right? So he will figure out all these entities. Okay. Then he will pick up from your requirement. What all information do I need to store about painting? So you look at that add painting screen and then see what information are we capturing. All that will be, he would store it. All that would become his attributes.
Sir, can we call painting as properties too, or attributes are properties?
No, ideally, see, it's a thing, right? About which, see, and it will have multiple details that you want to store. So there would be a painting ID. Then you will capture the dimensions of the painting, the cost of the painting, the insurance, what type of painting it is. There are a lot of. So there was a question regarding whether a painting should be an attribute or a entity, right? Now there are multiple details about painting that you're storing. So obviously it will be classified as an entity, because an attribute just would have one value, right? So let's say and obviously you cannot have just one value for a painting, right? So it definitely would not be considered as an attribute. Okay, so this first step of identifying entities, is that clear? Right. So anyway, you would not be creating the ER model, but I'm just telling you the steps involved in it. Right. So if you are an architect and you are about to create an entity ER diagram, right? So you look at the requirement, you look at the overall understanding, and then figure out who are all those entities, person, place, events, or things about which you need to store. You would figure out what all details about each entity that you want to store. Okay, so like there are a few things about artists that you want to store. Okay, these details would come in from your requirement. Okay, your artist screen would have captured all those name, ID, address, preferences about the artist. Then the artist ID, the year, the dimensions, the type, insurance, the value, a lot of details about the painting as well, right? All these details would be coming in from your requirement, right? Similarly, when you're loaning a painting or reserving a painting, right? So you'll capture the museum ID, then the painting ID, the loan of day, date of loaning, then the due date, what is the payment that you're receiving, right? All that would be covered as part of your node. Okay, and since it's related to the museum, you'd also capture all the museum details like name, what type of museum it is, what is the address, and all the coordinator over there, right? A lot of details about the museum. All these details should come in from your requirement. So the architect is not going to go and then talk to the customer and then understand these details. He's going to baseline your requirements document, and whatever you have captured, that becomes your requirement here. Is input to the ER model. So effectively, the requirement what you have captured would be the basis for creating an ER model. Okay, now you understand the link of what you are doing and what the architect is doing. Okay, so it becomes very important for you to identify all those details about what needs to be stored in the system when you're doing a requirement installation. You need to be as clear as possible. If some information is being captured, it should be clearly identified, either by showing that screen layout or listing down that these are the information, and then this needs to be stored in the information in this particular for this particular process and all. Like when a customer registration happens, design that customer registration layout and then say that these data points are being stored. All those details has to come out. Okay, clear about this? Till now, are you clear about how you translate that requirement into an ER model? We still have not figured out about the business rules. I'll explain that as well. That is pending, right? So it's not just the data about what you're storing in your system, but some business rules which are defining this process, right? Now, we talked about cardinality and modality, right, as a two business rules. Right? So when you are capturing the requirement, make sure that you ask those relevant questions to get those details out, right? Otherwise, you will be asked those questions later by the architect, and then you'll have to go back to the customer again, right? So whenever you are figuring out at each screen, like you're creating a painting screen, okay, and then you have information about the artist also stored in it, right? So artist information also is captured, right? Now obviously a painting and artist are related, right? A painting is drawn by an artist. Okay. Now the business rules have to be there, right? Now, if you look at the cardinality, right? Now, can a painting be drawn by multiple artists? I mean, see, some of them would be very simple, right? It could be like, so this is like multiple here, but some of them are not so coming out directly. Like can a painting be drawn by artist? All right. Anyway, coming back to this. So some of them would be very easy to understand. Like this, like an artist can have multiple paintings. But one painting, can it be drawn by multiple artists? So that purely depends on the business requirement. If the businessman says, you know what, I have paintings where there are multiple artists, and I want it that way, that a painting can have multiple artists, then it has to be many to many, right? Or if the artist comes back and then says, no, a painting would be created by only one artist, then it has to be like this, right? So it's a one to many in this case, right? So it is your responsibility to get those requirements detailed, right? So what type of relationship it is, right? Unless you ask that question, the businessman would not tell you that, right? And at a later point, this guy would definitely ask you that question, the architect, because he would need that. So you'll figure that out, okay? So you need to figure out that relationship between whether it's a one to many or many to many type of relationship. This is nothing but your cardinality, right? As a business rule, you could ask, right? You just have to be wary that this information has to be coming up. You are defining the modality, right? So modality basically says which information is dependent on what. So if you logically look at a painting, would definitely need an artist, right? A painting cannot exist without an artist, right? So there definitely has to be an artist. So obviously, an artist has to be created first, and then the painting would be created, right? So painting artist is mandatory. painting cannot exist without artist, and there could be even an artist without a painting also. What you do is, you would ask this question, right? So can there be a painting without an artist? If it is yes, uh, then you would put it as optional here. But in most cases it's not the way, right? So a painting cannot exist without an artist. So since it is coming out very clearly, this is a mandatory. So what it means is you'll have to enforce that rule here. Whenever you are creating a painting, the artist ID should definitely be there. If the artist ID is not there, right, then you should not allow create that painting. Why? Because a painting cannot exist without an artist, right? So designing your screens or when you're capturing your requirement, you have to make that clear. For painting, an artist ID is mandatory.
Can exist without artists. We might not know, who the artist is.
Right, but you definitely have to capture the artist ID, right? I mean,
Yeah.
have a paint.
It's mandatory, but it's not really, it's not really important.
Okay,
You might know the artist.
So you don't know who has drawn that painting, is what you.
Yeah.
But that's a business requirement, I guess, right? So we can have an artist saying that unknown or something like that.
Yeah.
But
there are a lot
if
of
you want to maintain that, so that's where.
Whose artists are unknown, but they are valuable. Somebody might own that.
So that's where that the rule comes. To complete that point, let me complete it. So it's not we who are taking that decision. So we are only asking those questions and getting what the SME is telling us, right? If the SME tells that a painting can exist without an artist ID, then obviously this is optional, right? So we don't have to even keep that mandatory. You get my point, right? So we are only getting the requirement. We are not the decision makers. We are asking those questions and ensuring that we have the details correctly. Now, why? Because at a later points it should not be a confusion. During testing, the customer, the businessman should not come in and then say, why is the artist ID mandatory? Because you should not make your own assumptions and ask all those right questions. That is what is the point I was trying to make, right? So unless you ask those questions, you will not get to know about this cardinality and morality. Okay. So in some cases, the artist ID, the businessman could say, artist ID is not mandatory. If it is there, then we'll add it. Otherwise, it's not required. Right? In that case, it becomes optional. Right? So it won't be mandatory. It won't be mandatory here. Okay? This would be optional. So if the details are available, you will enter it. Otherwise, you will not enter it. Right? So that you will not enforce it on the screen as well. Right? If it's mandatory, then you will not allow to the painting to be registered without the artist ID. If it is optional, then you will allow to register the painting even without an artist also. You get what I'm trying to say, guys? So able to understand the process, connect from where we capture the requirement to how it translates to your model. So I'm trying to bring that out using the same example. Okay. Now we have listed down those 3-4 screens and then captured all those details. Now the architect would look at the DBA or the data architect would look at all those details available. You will figure out what are all those entities, and then he would list down them as attributes, and then he will also figure out those business rules based on the details that you have captured as required. So you have to be sensitive to those details as well, because unless those details are captured, like the cardinality and modality, right? A lot of those questions would come back to you again. So it becomes imperative to you to make sure that you have all those details captured during the requirements phase itself. Okay. So whenever you are creating a painting, you should make sure that the paint, whether an artist is mandatory or not, and if so, what all details about artists you need to capture. All that you need to clearly call out. Are you clear with the ER model? Data model, basically, can you look at an ER model and then figure out what it is trying to convey? Basically, the entities, attributes, and then the relationships. and then are you clear about what detail, how your requirements are translated into a VR model, right? So basically, again, this we are trying to learn because it gives us the sense of what kind of details we should capture. So next session, we'll move on to the next topic, which is UML and then the use cases. So try to not miss the next few sessions because it's very important for you guys. Most of your requirements are captured using use cases. That is very important.